Hello friends and neighbors, Baxter here with you once again in my series of the divisions of the Bible, and I want to welcome you back. This is the sixth video that I've produced for us, and I wanted to say this morning we'll cover some things here in just a moment here, but you can find this on my YouTube page of Baxter Cribs or on this Facebook page that I have as Church of Christ. And I want to thank you for stopping in. And so let's get right into it, because I'll try to keep these short here for us. And so we are indeed, as you see here, I have upon my homemade board that I'm working off of, that we are talking about the divisions of the Bible. And it started out talking about how the Bible is divided into 16 divisions. And it's divided into two first, which is the Old Testament and the New Testament. And then it's divided into the patriarchs, the Mosaical time period before the cross right here, and then into the Christian age, which we are now in here, which is under the New Testament teaching. Now, we go back over here. This can be divided down into 16 divisions, as I've talked about before, and this is what we're covering. So over here, if you will, go back to the first four that I've talked about, those first 5 videos, and it will describe to you what has happened before this time period of Mount Sinai. We move on into here, and here today we have the people of Egypt, of Israel, have come out of Egypt, and they have come to Mount Sinai, as we went over last time, and now they've come up to the land of Jordan, or of Canaan, and they're going to cross over the river Jordan, and they're preparing to do that. And here at this time that Moses has sent 12 spies into the land, 12 representing the 12 tribes that are there, into the land to find out what is there, to get a scouting report of how they should approach to take this over, or whatever it is that they're going to do. And so when they come back out of there, 10 of those 12 people then have a bad report for this nation of Israel, for this Hebrew nation that is now set, as God has said, here's your land, I want you to go in and take it. 10 of them say, we can't do this. So they get a bad report here. But now there's 2 of them left, there's Joshua and Caleb, that stand up and tell them, no, we can do this because God has said that we can, and you should believe that and do that. Well, what happens is that they do not believe. The nation of Israel does not, and God is upset with them. And so because of their unbelief, some of them are struck dead right there and then, because of their unbelief towards that. But then also, God says, okay, here's going to be your punishment. That they were in there for 40 days, and so you're going to have to wander in the wilderness, which is why we call this the wilderness wandering section, for 40 years. And what in effect is going to happen in the end is that all those people that are there now, that are 20 and above, that have come out of Egypt, are going to pass away. They're going to die before what is the left nation will then be able to enter into that land of Canaan. And so they're condemned to wander for 40 years in the nation, in that area, and that's why we call it wilderness wandering. Now, we're going to move on down. These here things all come from the book of Deuteronomy and Numbers. Very, very little of this section here comes out of the book of Leviticus, but this whole idea comes from those 3 books. If you want to go and look that up and read and put this thing together, I hadn't been given any scriptures because it consumes a lot of time, but this is the place that these are at, is in Deuteronomy, Numbers, very little out of Leviticus in this section for today. But so the next thing we have here is it says, when you come out into the land, and so in chapter 15, as I see here of Numbers, where I put that down right there, chapter 15, when you come into the land, he gives them some things that they are going to have to do. Now, it's a long time away, but these are, in fact, things God says you got to do when you come into the land. In chapter 16 now, we found an uprising. You know how it is oftentimes whenever you got one man in control that somebody else is chosen, and some think, well, you know what, I'm a Levi too. I'm a leader of these people. Why come I'm not as important as you are? And so Korah, here, him and 250 other men rise up against Moses and say, you know what, we're going to take over. Moses, in effect, says, let's let God decide who's going to take over. And so they set up a deal where they go through all the things they go through, and this is where you'll find the earth opens up and swallows up those 250 men and all their camp, and then closes back upon them. A miracle of God at that point, but it's to show who is indeed is in power. Then we go to the next thing here, and the next chapters down we're going to find that this is where Aaron's rod budded, because at this point God wants to show them who I have chosen to be the high priest, who I have chosen to be your leaders. And so they set up a thing. God told him what to do. And so the next morning they found that Aaron's rod that he had had for some years now, using to walk with, and this is what this is a dead piece of wood that he's using as a walking stick. And the next morning, this dead piece of wood leaned up against these pieces they tell me leaned up against has buds on it. It is growing leaves, if you will, showing God's choice between who should be the leader, which was going to be Aaron, which is the same tribe that Moses was from, and he was actually Moses' brother. But he was going to be the high priest, and we know that Moses is the mediator here at these things that gets to talk with God. So Aaron's rod that budded, that got put into the Ark of the Covenant, by the way. Very few things are in there, and very few people get to see the Ark of the Covenant or even open it. And that was one of the reasons it could be done. Next we come, the fiery serpents come, and this is where we find that people are again rebelling against God. How terrible this is. Why didn't you leave us back over there in the land of Egypt? And here we are wandering around out here. We could have died back there. At least we had food. And just all sorts of complaints that they had, which they have had from the point that they came out of Egypt anyway. From the right after they crossed the Red Sea, being freed from the bondage and seeing the miracle of crossing the Red Sea, they're going to start complaining. And so God indeed sends serpents, snakes, into them to bite them, and a bunch of them die. Now, they want to know how to fix this. So God tells Moses, whenever he asks him, he says, you take and you make a fixture of a serpent, and you put it on a stick, and you put it up. And whoever looks upon that and believes that they will be healed because of what I've told you to do, they will be healed. This is where you find this story. Next we come on down, they're going to have, and there's a few things that go on in between here. I'm just trying to cover some major sections for us here. Next we find there is a second counting. Okay, remember in the last video there was a first counting of those who came out, a census. And here we're having a counting again of the people. Because remember up here, all these people had to die off. So we've covered in this little section here approximately 40 years that they've wandered. So this is a fair amount of time here. It's not like overnight, okay? And so you have a second counting of God's people there that are there, ready to go into the land of Egypt. Not land of Egypt, I'm sorry, into the land of Canaan. They got to cross over Jordan and all the things that are going to be forthcoming yet in future videos here. So they have that second counting right there, and then they go and they take over the land of Midianites, the ones on this side of Jordan. They conquer them, take them away, and then what ends up happening is 2.5 tribes of Israel stay on this side, and the others go to the other side of Jordan later on. So the Midianites are destroyed in here. And here we find Moses, and he gives them, and the Deuteronomy means a repeat of the law. Moses gives his speech to the people about what has happened, where they've come, what God has done. Here's the laws of God, and everything that you can read from chapter 1 of Deuteronomy to the end. Whenever we find at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses then dies. Now Moses died on this side of the land of Canaan. He did not get to go into the land of Canaan, which was where he started out. God had called him to bring his people out of Egypt, out of bondage back here for 400 years, come over, and then they go into that promised land. Because Moses, at one point, one sin, this is how important this is, to recognize how sin affects us, okay? Because Moses got angry with the people, and instead of giving God the glory and speaking to the rock and saying, produce the water, as God had told him to do, he struck the rock and said, shall me and Aaron give forth water out of this rock to you? And the water came out. God allowed it to happen. But then he told Moses, because you did not give me the glory, because you did not honor me, you can't enter into that land of Canaan. And so we find then Moses dies. He got to go up on Mount Pisgah and look at it, but he did not get to enter in. Carry that over with you, if you will, into the New Testament. There's the same effect, that at one sin, unforgiven sin, can keep you out of heaven. So here's what we find. Moses died. In the next section, we're going to get ready to go over and cross over into the land of Jordan and keep on moving through this divisions of the Bible. I hope you found this interesting, and I hope it's been profitable to you. And if you have found such, then if you will, if you find this on Facebook where this is put out, or on my YouTube channel, if you would share this with other people, because I like to share the small amount of knowledge that I have with everybody out there to inform them about God and His people and the history of it and how to understand the Bible, so the Bible makes sense. Because so many people say, I can't understand the Bible, when it's really just, it is a history of God's people from beginning to end. We just have to divide it out and see how serious God is, learn from the mistakes of the people that went before us, and see what God wants us to do in the future so that we can have a home with Him after this life here. Thank you, my friends. I hope you have enjoyed this. Have a good day, and we'll see you on the next video.